From the award-winning author of the best-selling book Girl Taken, What Did Not Kill Me, Made Me. Girl Taken 27 years later, a short story of a long transformation. Written and narrated by Elena Nikitina. I'm standing in the ashes of who I used to be. Halsey, Angel on Fire. Part 1. Let It Be. The curtains are drawn, relaxing in my favorite writing spot, embraced by the cozy darkness of the bedroom. I gather scraps of notes from the past attempts. Once again, I'm trying to work on the story that I started penciling 4 years ago, but never even got to the middle of it. Each effort ends up the same. 2 pages of drafting, and I'm stuck, losing the drive to describe that story further. I'm exhausted. It seems like I can only deliver a tiny dose of narration at a time. I know why. I have to stop writing. I'm physically unable to squeeze out any more memories on paper about that particular period of my life. It makes me cringe. I wonder how long it will take to finally launch that book. But the cozy darkness of my room is so magical. It won't let me live without fulfilling the writing crave. After several hours of struggle, trying to turn heavy memories into words, I give up and allow inspiration to take me somewhere far away. The brain switches over, and I start typing about something more uplifting and pleasant, whatever comes to mind. This is how all of my books, after Girl Taken, were born, spontaneously. Don't get me wrong, I don't lose hope. I'm sure that in a few years all my old notes will miraculously align and connect, and the new book will find the light of life, and hopefully readers. That book, that story, what am I even talking about, you may wonder. Some writers can be such a pain. Keeping a confiding reader in the dark, dying of impatience, that's what they enjoy doing. I'm not that kind, so let me explain. That book, well, it's not even a book, just a manuscript draft at the earliest stage. On and off, I've been working on it for what seems like an eternity. The story I'm trying to convey is about a terrible period of my life, the darkest times, that I lived through following my return from captivity. A new reality descended upon me right after I came back and kept me within its grip for many years. If you have read Girl Taken, I can hear you asking, what can possibly be worse than captivity and 9 months spent there, completely lost and buried among the remains of carefree youth? I think I can tell you right away what can be as bad. When someone violently takes your freedom from you, forcibly keeps you away from your loved ones, and makes you live on the border of life and death every day, it is merciless, terrible, unbearable. But being a victim is not your choice. You can't change anything. The only thing you can do is adapt to circumstances and fight daily to stay sane, stay alive. Unfortunately, people can do terrible things to themselves, often being their own cruelest enemies. In my opinion, there is only one thing that is equally as evil as captivity. It's when you voluntarily decide to destroy yourself, constantly taking wrong steps, knowing in advance that they will eventually kill you. It's when you prefer living in a black hole by choice. Unlike the dark, eerie time that I experienced in captivity, which made me want to live at any cost and stoically fight for another day, the shady abyss I plunged myself into after my return, in contrast, pressured me to lose the will of life. Don't you agree that confessing your own sins and acknowledging your own wrong choices is the hardest thing to do, especially for a person who went through enlightenment and recovery? Therefore, In order for me to write and finish that book, I have to disperse my memories on paper in doses, little by little. Otherwise, hurt for the lost, or rather wasted, time of my past, I risk burning alive at the stake on the fire of shame I built for myself. The challenge is emotional because I'm a different person right now. I feel guilty, and I feel bad about this squandered time of my life. Looking back, I often wonder what if professional psychological counseling were to exist in my country at that time, and I could talk and share my fears and pain. Perhaps I would never have plunged into the abyss of PTSD symptoms, and they wouldn't have kept me stuck down there for several years. Who knows how my life would have turned out if I had received professional help instead of dealing with this on my own. Now, I'm not writing about that. It's a completely different narrative. So, dear reader, if someday you would like to hear a heartbreaking story about one lost soul, then follow my writing journey. The book you are reading now is the second in a trilogy, if you will. At this moment, I want to write about the person who I am now, once the girl taken, who went through dark times, terrible recoveries, post-traumatic syndrome, and later, the woman transformed. An author and influencer, positive, happy and free-minded. Allow me to glorify the strength of the spirit, the resilience of a human being who can not only fight against their own demons and win, but also turn the energy of past pain into an inspirational vibe. Let me praise those who don't give up and those who choose to turn their weakness into a victory. I know there are many of them out there. This book is just another story about the rising from ashes. Part 2. My 27-year-old story in a few words. The world operates in a cunning manner. We humans prefer to think that we are content with the days of our lives and we know where we're going and what we'll encounter along the way at all times. But what about surviving? When it comes to survival, it is an entirely new page of the book of life. Survival. The word itself awakens a strange yet acute sense inside of us that can draw out arguably any emotion. Ask a loved one, what is the first thing that comes to mind when they hear the word survival? Perhaps an intense thriller film that was a box office success, a heart-wrenching news article about a child who was taken advantage of. As much as we'd like to think that we are isolated from these horrific manifestations and they could absolutely never happen to us, the spine-chilling truth is quite anonymous from our inner hopes. In the fall of 1994, my life took a sharp turn in the blink of an eye. Imagine you are walking home alone one evening. Suddenly, you're assaulted, drugged, and kidnapped. Strange men drive you through the night to another country, where they keep you prisoner in a tiny room with blacked-out windows at first, then in a pit under a house, later in captivity. They speak a language you don't understand. This terrible thing happened to me. Just 3 weeks after my 21st birthday, I was abducted from the streets of my hometown by a group of criminals. During my first days in confinement, I had no idea where I was, why I was there, nor did I even understand what anyone was saying. After a while, they informed me I was kidnapped, and they tried to ransom me back to my mom. I did not have anything, not even a toothbrush. I had no comb, other clothing, or spare underwear. Every day, I had to knock on the door of my room so that a gunman would let me out and walk me to the bathroom under his supervision. Every day was the same. It did not come to an end, but transitioned to the next looking exactly like the one prior to it. Short, dreamless nights turned into endless, pointless days, full of hope in the morning and sorrow by nightfall. I would have preferred to never wake up at all, until the day of my salvation. I was pretty certain that one dark night salvation would truly come. Special police forces would storm into the building and save me. Instead, a brutal civil war broke out. The country turned into an apocalyptic killing zone, but no SWAT team was coming for me. There was no electricity or telephone service, and all lines of contact were cut off. 247 days and nights I spent in captivity witnessing atrocities, surviving bombings, and sexual violence. I saw things I cannot even bear to think about. I fought desperately to stay alive, stay sane, and not to lose the one thing that kept me going: my hope. Only hope and faith sustained me in moments of total and all-embracing despair. These circumstances occurred within my life and completely twisted it upside down. They brutally beat my soul from different sides, then crushed it into a million shards. Years later, everything was miraculously glued back together, except for the handful of tiny pieces that were so torn and damaged they were unable to be reattached. The best I could do was hold them back, using invisible band-aids. Those unhealed pieces are still hanging out under layers of sticky bandages in my current days. When I returned home, like waking up from the worst nightmare imaginable, I could never have thought that those very events would lead to quite an amazing outcome. In an instant, my life would surprisingly be placed from my head back to my steady feet, with my outer shell and internal spirit stronger than ever. I survived and I lived, and many years later, recovered. I was able to write my memoir, Girl Taken, a true story of abduction, captivity, and survival. It took me 247 days and nights to know that I am a survivor, and another 26 years to really start feeling like one. I remember that day when I suddenly felt myself fully recovered. Part 3. Why Girl Taken was born. It was one of the spring days of 2015. Relaxing in comfy recliners at the movie theater with my then 30-year-old daughter, we watched trailers of films that just so happened to be based on true stories. At that very moment, an amazing idea struck me like lightning, and I thought to myself, pretty loud in my head, I too have a story to tell. That ordinary evening at the movies turned into such a remarkable one. I had to admit, it was for the very first time that I could voluntarily think about what had happened to me, without the fear of excruciatingly painful memories, since my miraculous comeback in June of 1995. Confident and absolutely positive, I wanted to share the most horrifying time in my life with the world. To my surprise, and most importantly, I finally had the inner strength to talk about it. Our regular mother-daughter movie time became a spectacular breakthrough. Even though I had a clear intention in my head, I did not know how to develop it into something bigger. I had no idea where to start and what to exactly do with my story. My life at that time was undergoing major changes, or rather, existed in a deplorable state. My marriage had cracked. I was one step away from getting a divorce. My soon-to-be ex-husband involved me in a financial fraud behind my back. Once I found out about his manipulations and the unfaithfulness on top, I was ready to untie the knot. I filed for divorce, which greatly angered him. In revenge, he immediately fired me from his firm where I worked as a marketing director for the last 8 years. There was no compensation, but a referral letter that said that I was immediately dismissed due to my poor work not coping with duties. Thus, he left me without any income and no ability to find a job with such a pathetic recommendation letter. Instead of working on a mutual resolution and parting in a civilized manner, he soon closed his firm and left the country to hide abroad, leaving me with an enormous debt that he and his business had acquired, all on my shoulders. With no source of income, I was unable to maintain the house payments and utilities. The mortgage company flooded me with letters threatening with filing for foreclosure. As the Russian saying goes, if a trouble comes, leave a door open. Misfortunes never come alone. On top of that, I was diagnosed with an illness which was slowly killing me from inside. I had no cure. No doctors could predict when it could take the final blow. The biopsy did not look promising. My life was going downhill rapidly. Waking up every morning and falling asleep every night under the weight of the thought that I have an incurable disease, it was so depressing, unbearable, and rather cruel. Dear reader, before your pity for me reaches its limits, I want to say right away that I wasn't going to give up. Despite the difficulties, I hoped for the better life. In addition, confidence about sharing my story grew. It thrived like a young oak maturing into a powerful giant in fertile soil. I searched for an elusive map on how to tell my story and needed some advice. I emailed one of my social media friends who happened to be a documentary film producer, asking him for any recommendations on what to do with a story like mine. He puzzled me with his brilliant response. He said I needed to write a book. A book? How peculiar! I had been probing the quill my whole life, here and there, but nothing major. There are a few hundred little pieces of prose, 2-line poems, and random sayings in my computer folders and phone notes. Long ago, I found out that the best way to get rid of unpleasant feelings, or to double and remember happy moods, is to put them into words on paper. The challenge of writing something so big that it could be called a book, this seemed super exciting. I scratched my head. This project appeared unreal, like a phantasm or an ephemeral dream. Even thinking about it made me so moved, thrilled, and somewhat scared. My pumping adrenaline quickly convinced me to go for it. It was a great aspiration in every way solely because it would make one of my old dreams come true. For years I've been nurturing the idea of telling my mom about being in captivity. If I could write about it, she could read it. Even if the story would not be seen or heard by anyone else, and the only audience would be limited to a single person, my mom, the idea seemed perfect for that exact purpose. My mama has the right to know what I truly went through in captivity. Since my return, I'd never talked about it with anyone. Well, only with the federals during interrogation right after I came back. But not with my mom, believe it or not. In the beginning, the wounds were so deep, we did not want to rake through the painful memories and live through them again. After a few months, we silently agreed to just bury it deep inside and forget it forever, so we could move forward with our lives. We knew that our torn souls and broken hearts had deep and terrible scars. Some of them were never fully healed. More than 2 decades after captivity, I was ready to make a revelation. I thought writing might help me purify my aura and soul and let the memories become the past as they should be. I had no idea if I even remembered all the events and details of my captivity, so I predicted a 10-page story. I was excited and scared at the same time. I had no idea what the book could bring. Before that time, I never let myself venture through my memories. Sometimes my mind tried to play a cruel joke with me, trying to open the tightly closed door and set some memories from the past free. I fought back right away with all my strength to shut that door and keep it tightly guarded under 7 seals, knowing that the criminals involved have never been caught added a thrilling note. The book planning excited me and brought so many different thoughts to swarm in my head. The world is full of victims, but I'd never met survivors, others who were once abducted, trafficked, abused, or had gone through something horrible like myself. For over 20 years, I was doing my best trying to forget the atrocities I experienced and witnessed, without looking back in order to be able to live a normal life. I did not want to be a victim anymore. I chose to become a survivor. But how were others coping after being so deeply psychologically traumatized? I had many questions, yet no answers. Now I craved sharing my story. On the other side of my life, falling into a trap of new reality, I did not see a way out. The illness, the debt, the foreclosure, absence of income. It seemed to me that this would never be resolved. Desperate and depressed, accompanied daily by panic attacks, I needed to pull myself together. I had to. The tiny army of supporters, my daughter and my mom by my side, they were the rays of light in my crazy life. I was the only one who could take care of them. They depended on me. I could not give up. And I acquired another new goal, the book project. My life was divided into 2 parts. During the day, I tried dealing with recently discovered problems that all of a sudden became my new life. At night, I was writing a book. Deciding to take 1 step at a time, I went to a 6-week real estate school in hopes of starting a new career. I managed to postpone the foreclosure that let me list the house. With my new real estate license, I wanted to sell my home by myself and save on commissions and hopefully pay off the mortgage. My savings account was emptying with supersonic speed. The nights were sleepless. The weight of the debt on my shoulders was pushing down on me with its 6-digit number. I needed to hire a professional to fight for justice and finally get a divorce. I had no idea where my husband was. Spending too many nights crying and pleading, I begged that my condition would not progress but give me the opportunity to settle all matters. I prayed for the forgiveness of my sins and sobbed helplessly for mercy. God works in mysterious ways. That's why our life is full of surprises. Life can be cruel and forgiving. Today, it spoils us with breathtakingly happy moments. But tomorrow, it suddenly knocks us off our feet, leaving us alone on the sidelines of life, laughing and watching us writhe in pain. Despite the possible perspectives portrayed above, and without any doubt, life is wonderful. It's unpredictable but fascinating, yet impartial with undertones of amazement. Therefore, life is absolutely worth experiencing. One morning, I received an answer to my prayers. The night before, almost fallen asleep, I felt a sharp pang of remorse again. Consumed by a fit of despair, I sobbed over my pitiful life, begging for mercy. I was sure that the ailment was given to me for my own stupidity. I prayed to be forgiven for the wrong choices I made in the past, for the indecent priorities I selected in the previous days. As an echo from the long ago past times, the diagnosis rolled over me like a reminder of my recklessness, showing me how much I was wrong. While praying, I neither asked for nor expected miracles. Somewhere deep inside, I still secretly hoped for some sign from above so that I could let the guilt go. And, as they say, for everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds. Knock, and it will be open for you. Be persistent, and you will be rewarded. I have already experienced the extraordinary power of divine providence once, which I elaborated in my book, Girl Taken, but I never imagined that it could happen again. That night, I stayed up late crying into my pillow until I fell asleep. Next morning began with a shock. I woke up and got a call from my doctor, who I periodically visited to check my condition. There was an experimental drug, he said, that was recently introduced and went through a clinical trial, showing good results. It was about to become available on the market. Since it was a new brand-name medicine, it was going to be extremely expensive. And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sadly, the drug could not guarantee the cure, but there was a chance. A new hope flashed before my eyes, but only for a few moments, then immediately vanished. I could never in my life afford such an expensive treatment. A few days later, I received a call from the fund which supported people with conditions like mine. If I agreed to undergo the treatment, they said, they would provide the drug for a full course, 9 months, at no charge. You may not believe me. I'm fine with it, only because I myself did not believe what I was hearing. At the exact moment when I thought my life was ruined, God's grace descended on me. What was it? Was I forgiven, and He handed me a lifeline? I did not know, but I grabbed onto it without even knowing if it would help me. The decision was quickly made. Every 30 days, I received a package with a month's supply of the drug. I was taking a bunch of pills every day, a few times a day, almost for a year. It's amazing how often life brings us face to face with dilemmas that we have to solve. At the same time, it frequently presents us with solutions too. The longer I exist in the realm of this captivating and intricate world, the more I'm convinced that all the events in our lives aren't happening simply by accident. Winnings make us feel great. Losses make us stronger in life. Each and every event affects the further course of life, one way or another, sooner or later. Like chain links connected between each other, they made us who we are today. The broken links of my life gradually and fortunately were coming together again, as if I was repairing each link and reconnecting it to the previous one to make the chain stronger each time. I officially got divorced on Valentine's Day, after going through a long litigation ordeal together with my lawyer. We won the death case. The creditors found out how the money was used and that I had nothing to do with it. I struggled with my home sale and ended up selling it for half of the price. But that was enough to pay off the loan. After 9 months of taking medication, my condition was cured. Life improved significantly. Only new goals and victories lay ahead of me. Part 4. Writing is a miracle. Whether I felt miserable or exceptionally happy, writing was my outlet. My nights were filled with pleasing darkness and inspiration. Once I started to dig out my memory bank, I could not stop. A volcano, one which held my suppressed emotions, boiling inside me for so long, erupted with lava of details. They were still so fresh that I had to re-encounter those painful episodes all over again. The writing process was emotionally exhausting, but it possessed me fully and undividedly. I wrote and wrote and wrote some more. As I was writing my book, I was facing my own unanticipated transformation. Besides the fact that I was the main character who was telling her own story of survival, a whole set of new feelings blossomed inside of me during the writing process. As the page count was growing, so was I, developing into a true author, into a person of art who seeks the appreciation of a reader. I wanted my book to be engaging and interesting to read. I wanted my audience to live my 8 months of misery along with me. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to see what I saw through my words and descriptions. Before I started writing a book, I never actually thought in depth about projects of human intellect. The more I was immersing myself into the captivating waters of creating writing, the more I realized how magical it truly was. It's a process of making something tangible out of nothing at all, similar to an amazing magician who creates a beautiful pearly white pigeon out of thin air under a delicate silk scarf, in front of a stunned throng all frozen in awe. The surprised crowd barely has a second to recover from the first trick when the bird then flies above them, letting hundreds of eyes witness the flapping wings of the magnificent creature. This is how the writing process seems to me. Pure magic. If you are as passionate about writing as I am, you know what I'm talking about. There are some of you out there who feel the same way I do. For me, the process of writing starts long before the moment I actually begin to write. First, I feel that barely sensed urge to craft something new, something unique that no one has attempted before. I can't sleep. I can't think about anything else. The very idea of it is just drifting in the atmosphere. I'm the only one who can distinguish its presence within my skin. I feel its existence in my very core and know that I need to catch and materialize it. It's transparent. It's invisible. The more I think about the idea, the denser it becomes, the faster it acquires a clear outline, and the faster it shows its solid form in my imagination. A moment later, I see it defined, a poem or the plot of a story, building up in my mind from the beginning to the end. My soul is so excited and overwhelmed with the new idea that I become agitated and cannot wait to start writing. My newly acquired obsession is like a huge hot air balloon, inflated to the fullest with my fresh writing concepts and irrepressible enthusiasm. It is impatiently waiting to soar into the sky and to please the observers that will be surprised by the captivating trajectories of flight. Writing is a marvelous thing, isn't it? Sadly, the action of writing is not always a path strewn with the rose petals. The process of writing can be a complete and utter fiasco when the moment strikes that every writer is afraid of, a writer's block. When mine suddenly dawns, it submerges me into a darkness of ultimate creative incapability, after which I'm sitting at the computer, or in some cases with a notebook and pen at the table, staring at the snow-white surface for hours, unable to form a single prolific sentence. After a few days of creative obstacles, I start worrying so much that the light disappointment turns into obsessive thoughts. I clearly understand that such a state of mind is not conducive to the restoration of flow, but I can help it. In days, panic possesses me completely. I pull my hair, assuming it's the end of my writing era. That state can go for days, even weeks, until one magical moment, all 9 muses kindly decide to favor my ability back and inspire me to pick up a pen. All of a sudden, something magnificently changes, and I feel that rush to express and to write. What a moment! To me, the most sensational moment in writing, which nothing else can compare to, is the deep, pleasant sense of falling in love with what I write. Even if it's a single sentence or a short paragraph, there is no equivalent to the feeling of complete satisfaction, accompanied by the adrenaline rush at the moment you realize you love the result. The profound feeling of being pleased with what you have just created is worth 1,000 writer's blocks. Writing is a miracle. There are thousands and thousands of magicians out there. All of them are different in the way they express themselves in their work, in the genres and styles they choose to create in. Nevertheless, regardless of these similarities, writers appear very alike in the amount of swirling chaos, in the essence of their brains, in the tremendous efforts they instill in their work, in the number of sleepless nights they endure while working on their writing projects. We should be different, all creating on different levels of artistic craziness, What we give birth to is what we also believe and have faith in. We all love our work like we love our kids. We are proud of it because without any doubt it is unique and original, something no one else has created before. As I was drafting the manuscript Girl Taken in my native language, I had plans to translate it into English and make both versions available for readers. Later in the journey, I hired an author who helped me on the English version. I had been writing like a man possessed, and it took about a year to finish. Finally, after months of sleepless nights, an ocean of tears, and tons of memory tortures, 2 books, just like babies to me, were born, identical copies in both English and Russian languages. Part 5. The End of Dreams. To tell you the truth, I was overjoyed by the idea that I was able to create something that I could see and touch, a physical product, a manuscript, a future book, from essentially nothing, out of painful thoughts, deeply trampled memories, and years of seeping heartaches. My first book cost me tremendous mental efforts, and it was a part of me. A realization of the idea that my heartfelt revelations would be brought to the reader's jury was both frightening and exciting at the same time. I longed to experience everything that a written book can bring: readers' appreciation and success, or even rejections and failures. I knew there would be a long journey ahead of me. There was no doubt for me that first I had to find a literary agent, the one who would be intrigued enough by my story and willing to help me get my book published on great terms and control the promotional and hopefully successful process. Self-publishing was definitely not on my mind then. I did not even consider that option because I didn't know it existed, like a newborn kitten, totally blind. I had no idea how to deal with a finished literary product. It was time to open my eyes and expand my horizons. It had to be the next step in my wonderful journey. I thought I achieved the majority of my goals and wanted a literary agent to see the quality of my work. I needed to represent my work nicely, served on a beautiful platter like a highly desirable gourmet dish. A great pitch letter could add that exotic flavor and touch. I realized that a pitch letter serves as a delivery machine to impress and convince a recipient. It outlines the essence of a story's idea in a creative yet condensed way in order to capture the attention of the receiver. Finally, after a few days, the enticing bait was ready to tempt reluctant agents. A pitch letter turned me into an angler whose goal wasn't to simply cast a line and wait, but to make the fish take the bait, then to skillfully set the hook right in the fish's mouth. I wanted to make sure it would not break away, but instead eagerly take in the bait. On the promising morning, in the very beginning of January of 2017, 20 copies of the pitch letter were emailed. They flew away from their nests like restless young birds leaving their birth cradles, and irrepressibly winged their way to conquer literary agencies, or at least 1 out of 20, on both coasts of the United States, New York and California. To me, it felt like a huge step forward, like another obstacle was victoriously triumphed over. With each passing day, impatience burned me from the inside. I was trying to do my best to stay positive and keep my hopes high as the sky. The waiting time for agents' responses turned into one leisurely sleeping sloth, frozen on a thick tree branch and not wanting to budge. 4 or 5 weeks later, I started receiving responses. Rejections were showering me all over. Wise people say that rejections are inalienable parts of success. In order to not lose my good spirit, I willingly and voluntarily choose to believe in such a theory. What do rejections really mean to people? especially to a person of art, a writer or creator, one who instills their gift, intellect, talent, and soul into each masterpiece and truly extraordinary invention, imbued with the maker's energy and character. For some, rejections become so fundamental and crucial that they lead to complete discouragement. Repetitive rejections hit like a hammer, sending a nail into a wooden coffin of disappointments, going further down every time, where inside all bright hopes and big dreams would rest forever. Some sensitive individuals would simply not be able to survive. They would stop believing in themselves, ruining their dreams and burying them alive. For others, it causes the opposite effect. Each rejection brings a new impetus for an explosion of a noteworthy and unique idea. Rejections will harden them like steel. Every rejection stabbed me right in my soul. The never-before-experienced state of being refused was quite demoralizing, as I started receiving short but very painful responses, informing me that the agent was not interested in representing my book. Each email was brief, containing just a few words, yet all felt equally and powerfully brutal on me. I believed in the awe-inspiring quality of my narrated story, completely and unconditionally. I wanted to think that the one who would read the manuscript or even the synopsis would surely be intrigued at the least and want to see what it's all about or what happens next. I was certain that I could convey my feelings intelligibly enough to arouse the reader's interest. I was positive that a compassionate bibliophile could easily be absorbed on the palette of the profoundly described experiences of events and emotions. I loved my work with all my heart. I loved how it was written, under what conditions and for what reasons. My entire adult life practically existed in order to build a foundation for the possibility of writing that book. I would be quite disappointed if agents were not touched by the feelings I tried to describe to readers. I received the first few rejections, but I did not want to have even a slight chance of doubting or giving up in the very beginning of my journey. Instead, I created a concept to cope with rejections and explained them to myself in a few ways. Every literary agent represents a certain niche or a particular genre. My story was written as a memoir. It must be really difficult to sell books in such a genre unless the author is famous or well-known. I was not a star or a celebrity. It made sense that agents did not want to deal with me and represent my memoir. Perhaps agents don't even delve into the world of the synopsis or the essence of the email itself, but simply just disown and send out a refusal that they deliberately write because they're busy with a huge number of other projects. That was the other one, the most basic explanation I came up with to excuse agents' rejections. I shoved off any thoughts about my story being uninteresting or unworthy of attention, so it was far from my mind. In the beginning of my journey, the explanations I created did not work too well. The matter of my narration was so delicate and dear to me that the agent's rejections or showed indifferences felt twice as painful. I saw myself on a pedestal, totally naked, on a large square in the middle of rush hour, bearing my very soul in an awfully tormented body before the eyes of strangers. To me, every rejection was considered another failure, which brought additional pain that would remain with me forever. Due to the nature of my story and my sensitivity, I mistakenly accepted refusals as a criticism of myself. Down the road and later on in the journey, when I was working on my book publicity through cold emailing, I received many more rejections from journalists, agents, producers, and reporters, written in different forms, ranging from polite to ungracious. With each one, my heart trembled, and tears covered my pillows as I swore to myself at night that I would quit promoting my book, that I would no longer try to reach media people again or send any more emails, as I wanted to avoid the misery of rejection. As the Russians say, morning is wiser than the evening. Following each breakdown, I woke up a tad wiser, fortunately. The realization that such a destructive state of mind couldn't bring me anything but disappointment and a broken spirit in the long run enlightened me. As a result, I did not give myself a chance to quit. So, a few years later, I'm still on my plan, sending emails, getting mixed responses. I was still going forward despite any worries I experienced, and it was paying off. With each day on my path, I get closer to my dream than the day before. Every victory, big or small, makes me incredibly happy and more empowered. By now, I'm nearly indestructible. All the tears I was shedding in the beginning of my journey, all the rejections I was experiencing with time, they gradually and surely taught me the most valuable lessons. As I was feeling stronger, my skin tempered hard enough to not let someone's subjective opinion penetrate deep into my heart and leave scars. Over time, I found my inner peace with rejections and learned how to accept and deal with them on my own emotional level, stoic and cold-blooded. I learned that a rejection does not define my personality or the work I have done. Most of the time, it's a one-sided opinion of a given person. We are all people with our bad and good days, mood waves, and other individual issues. The perception of a good work may change even within oneself, depending on his or her emotional state. Rejections are nothing more but a product of different elements not coming together as they should. In other words, the combination of things simply was not in my favor. I had to wait until the right time came and the stars in the sky aligned. Since I could not control my own destiny, I focused on the only thing I could do for myself, doing my best to prepare the perfect ground for the time when it finally came. So, I chose to be patient, be consistent. That was my final, most satisfying and hopeful rationalization that I came up with for myself. Unfortunately, I acquired such a mindset only later in my journey, learning my lessons little by little, as my destiny served them to me on a platter to test my spirit. Part 6. You're hired, you are fired. Yet then, fate was benevolent to me. Just a few weeks and breakdowns later, after the first 12 rejections, I also received positive responses from that list of 20. 3 agents were interested in working with me and my book. This number exceeded my expectations. I was extremely happy. It instilled me with energy to proceed further. 3 different conference calls were scheduled for all agents. During our phone conversations, we discussed the intentions of each of the agents, talked about their goals and visions. They all sounded excited and enthusiastic over the phone. During the conference calls, like music to my ears, I heard a squall of pleasant dithyrambs about my unique story and well-written book from all 3 agents. Each of them wanted me. Each of them was convincing me to sign a contract. I was in heaven. I soared in the clouds and did not wish to go back down to earth again. Unfortunately, I could not stay on the throne for long. I had to go back to reality, make a decision, and choose only one agent. I was overjoyed. I could not prefer one over another. After some intense thinking, relying on my intuition and my co-author's friendly opinion, I decided to proceed with one of them. It was the end of February 2017, and that's important to remember. I said my final yes and signed a contract with a literary agent from New York. She seemed very professional and excited to work on the project, promising all the gold in the world and satisfying my ego. I was beyond happy and absolutely positive that it was the end of my troubles. I was certain that my new agent was a fairy who would make all my dreams come true. Everything had to be fine and great now. Euphoric thoughts and daydreams fully possessed me. My almighty agent would now take the reins in her hands, and my book would travel a successful and smooth path like a happy child sliding down a snowy hill in a winter park resort. My new literary agent's plan was to pitch and submit my book, Girl Taking, to publishing companies and negotiate a great deal. I imagined her as the middle person, as the bridge between myself with my literary work and a successful publication. During our initial and following phone conversations, she presented a pretty adequate and promising plan, which convinced me to see her as a professional with a substantial number of contacts of the greatest publishing companies out there. I envisioned that in the successful business world of book publishing, great agents and respectful publishers were essentially pretty familiar with each other and even in person. As a result, agents have inside information and usually know exactly what certain publishers would be looking for in manuscripts. They know which market demands a particular supply. For me, great literary agents are matchmakers. They are intuitive and they know exactly how to find a perfect match. What I would have liked to see in my agent was that professional flair in knowing the tastes of respectable publishers. I would think that the agent's nature was to submit manuscripts only to those who could potentially accept them. My new agent inspired confidence and seemed to meet all the requirements fully. It looked like a win-win situation for the both of us. I had done my part. I wrote a book that my agent adored and loved. The book has a lot of potential, she said. It's going to be great, she said. I believed what she said. Now all I had to do was simply wait, resting on my laurels. At that moment, it seemed as if the whole process would be carried out very quickly, very smoothly, according exactly to our established plan. I was reveling within her enthusiasm, anticipating that responses from the publishers would not make me wait too long. I naively believed that after we entered into a contract, my agent would immediately charge into a battle and begin her work promptly. After the contract was signed, I impatiently awaited the next step. I could barely refrain from the desire to keep emailing my agent every day to remind her about myself and my literary work's existence. Only 4 weeks later, and to my long-awaited bliss, my agent finally submitted my manuscript to 13 publishing companies, all great names in the industry. Now, I had to wait and email my agent every 6 to 8 weeks, inquiring about possible rejections. I needed to be patient and composed while waiting for the responses. I repeated these words like my mantra over and over again, every day. Unexpectedly, in that moment, my life had a split. It was suddenly divided into 2 parts. These 2 parts were somehow still connected to each other, but nevertheless, each of them took place in a completely different dimension of time. The first included my everyday life and all that it associated and brought with it. Regular daily schedule, all the ups and downs, all the thrills and sadness. Not too different from the moments of thousands of other people's lives around the globe. This part was rushing through my days crazy fast, hypersonic, like a space shuttle hurtling through the Earth's atmosphere. The second part was solely related to my book, and it was a standing swamp. During the first month, my agent received 5 rejections. It appeared that the aforementioned publishers weren't quite ready to work with topics involving Russia, Chechnya, or a war, as they clearly stated in their electronic responses. I accepted their decisions without any hardship, pretty wisely, almost philosophically. I still had 8 more chances, but something else was on my mind then. There was another sensitive matter regarding my contract with the agent, which I had to admit was the most unpleasant one, the one that bothered me the most. It was regarding my book, Girl Taken, in Russian language. As you may remember, Girl Taken was written in 2 languages, in English and in my native one. Actually, the Russian manuscript, Nevoля, served as a womb for the English version. It was main, it was principal. The contract I signed with the agent wouldn't let me publish the Russian version of the book. We would have to wait for the success of the English version first, and then translate it into other languages later if needed, as well as by their own chosen translator. For me it sounded ridiculously silly, as I would never agree to mess with the book in Russian. I wanted it to be published eventually and only in my original writing. However, at the time, it all seemed like a very far-away project, and I did not want to think about it. Then and there, my mind was only revolving around one thing. I desperately wanted Girl Taken to be accepted by the agent, integrated into work, and be successful. I had no time or desire to wait any longer, and I could not spend any more time finding another agent. I realized that the Russian version would be a stumbling block with every single agency I could possibly find. I preferred to overlook that paragraph of the contract. Like Scarlett O'Hara, I decided to think of it tomorrow, or later on when the time would come. As my agent and I were waiting for the other 8 responses for a few more weeks, my enthusiasm, appearing in the beginning volcanic and hot, gradually began to fade. Fortune no longer favored me. The time of waiting turned into one colossal balloon, inflating more and more with every week, getting bigger, with no limits to size or dimensions. It had already been enormously sucked, yet couldn't burst, unlike my patience. The summer of 2017 was about to pass the baton over to the upcoming autumn. It was already August, signifying 6 months since I signed the contract and started working with the agent. The remaining 8 publishers never responded at all. Unfortunately, the perception of time is not an absolute measure. It's always being relative. To me, a period of half a year without any progress seemed insurmountably long. I was losing my recently acquired philosophical patience. I began to question and doubt my choice of an agent. I was not sure if I had to find another agent or go an alternative way. As I was searching information about other literary agencies and book publishers, I learned that some people successfully publish their work without any agency involvement whatsoever. The more I thought about self-publishing, the more I was tempted by it. The best thing I could get from it was the possibility of publishing both books at the same time. The appeal was very abundant, and that was what I really wanted. What I definitely didn't want was to waste another month or 6. I decided to terminate the contract with my agent on August 27, 2017. We mutually agreed to end it over a simple one-line email, and I was free from all obligations. I could do whatever I wanted with my books, and it felt incredible. I felt liberated, as if chains were lifted from me. My 2 books came back to life again after a long coma. I could not wait to publish them and do it all at once. That feeling of newly acquired control, as well as having the power and ability to make my own decisions, was something completely different from the sense I had for the past 6 months. Deep inside, I was glad that it did not work out with the agency. I had no idea what the future held for me then, but I could only imagine the different opportunities that it could bring. The most important thing in that moment was that I could publish 2 books at once without someone else's permission, and I decided to do so. Now I was the only one who was responsible for all future fiascos as well as victories. I was even somewhat grateful for the last 6 months. I definitely did not take it as a loss or a waste of time. The stages I went through while waiting for the publisher's responses gave me definite room to think. It taught me a few lessons and helped me find my priorities. I was grateful for that. Perhaps self-publishing was meant for me after all, and it was my destiny from the beginning. All I required were certain circumstances to be able to figure it out. After 6 months, I could not wait to spread my tightly closed wings. I saw new horizons in front of me, and I was getting ready to fly towards them. I wanted to turn gradually gained disappointment into raging energy. The whole world was at my fingertips. I just needed to pull through and conquer it. My laurels could wait. Part 7. A start from scratch again. If I take a look at my whole life from the past, excluding the first few years of a happy childhood and the following decade of my delighted adolescent ages, I can say that the rest of my existence, starting at about 20 years old till now, was woven with either obstacles or their aftermaths. My wholesome, endlessly pleasant contentment ended in 1994. Since then, black and white stripes consistently superimposed over each other. After almost a whole year that I spent in captivity, I went through a few miserable years of recovery with whole sets of ups and downs. I couldn't find myself for a really long time, living in a darkness by choice. Revived, I moved to the USA and spent many years trying to adapt to the new society, battling anxieties related to the language barrier, inability to communicate, fear of being misunderstood, lack of friends and relatives, deficiency of American education, minimal choices to find good work, and many other troubles that usually accompany immigration. To say the least, each of the obstacles throughout the spin of life imprinted astoundingly on my personality, which gave a rise to another fear and complex in me. As a result, I'm full of phobias. Every time I embark on something new or challenging in my life, I need to fight my inner demons firsthand, and if I win the battle, I then proceed with the achievement of my dream. I consider myself a strong person, and most of the time my inner fear gets defeated, and I salute victory. I know that every obstacle makes me grow personally, and each time I win, one of my anxieties is vanquished. The giant army of my fears decreases. At that time, when I terminated the contract with a literary agent, I again for some time started feeling hopeless and scared in the face of the unknown. Fortunately, the anxiety did not fully possess me. The joyful sense of novelty and the thrill of possible opportunities and expectations of success made me create enough energy to quickly conquer the inner fright. All I needed was to learn something new, to learn how to become a published author. My enthusiasm and excitement were overwhelming. It took me a number of days to get everything ready for self-publishing. The noticeable everyday progress of moving forward inspired me. The standing swamp had suddenly become a whirlpool. I was happy and proud to see my little yet consistent steps, which were carrying my dream to the place where it would soon become a reality. I needed to watch roughly 1 million YouTube videos to learn how to deal with creating a book cover, format the text, edit it, and so on down the list. There were about 50 items on that list that required me to learn something new every day, a few times a day. As my grandmother used to say, the eyes are afraid, but the hands are doing. In other words, you'll never know what you can do till you try. The number of things I had to learn was enormous, but the desire to publish my creation was weightier. It took me about 3 weeks to wrap up the project, from the day I left the contract till the time I chose for publication. The release day was set up on September 21st, 2017. Just a few hours before that moment, realizing the closeness of the publication event, I became extremely fearful. The dual feeling was tearing me apart as I started worrying about the things I forgot in the midst of being so excited while preparing the book for publication. As the writer, I could not wait to publish my long-awaited project, but as the main character of the book, all my fears and perturbations unexpectedly filled me up. All of a sudden, I became so scared about the possible outcomes after publishing. I became devastated because I was not sure how people would take it and how I would be perceived after such a revelation. I had to bare my soul before people that I've already known, as well as in front of complete strangers. The other aspect that was truly terrifying, the criminals were never caught. What could that bring? The scheduled publishing moment was approaching so fast, just a few hours remained. I still could not find peace within myself, constantly weighing the pros and cons on a scale of my own comfort. Every minute in my mind, I observed how the scale drastically overweighed one way or the other. The night before the books were published, I could not sleep. I knew that my life would never be the same again. Part 8. American Dream. That remarkable morning in September of 2017 will always be stored on a special shelf in my memory library. I considered it extraordinary, not only because my books were published at that time, but because the process of metamorphosis, which I had been going through for a very long time, culminated on that particular morning. I finally discerned myself as a different person, strong enough physically and emotionally, tough enough not only because I was able to write about my experience, but the most importantly to me, I felt the confidence to share and discuss it with the world. Once my books appeared as published items, I made an announcement on my social media. I was overwhelmed with both excitement and apprehension altogether. Agitated to the very core, I was awaiting my friends' comments. I did not know what reaction to expect. Almost immediately, I received a huge flurry of heartfelt messages and words of support that carried me away by their affection. I could not help but cry. It was amazing finding out about how many thoughtful and kind people I was surrounded by. I could have never imagined that so many of them could be genuinely touched by someone else's painful memories. I was moved and lifted from my previously negative mindset into a place that I never expected. I was receiving feedback that turned my worrying anticipation into an absolutely miraculous feeling, which comforted and soothed my inner fears. When I was in the process of writing the book, I hoped that expressing my experiences on paper would be my healing therapy. I looked at that as a kind of cure, even though I had to go through pain while recalling my memories and putting them into words. It was only after publishing that I realized I was wrong. The feedback I was receiving from people was my true healing therapy. My Facebook's wall had never been that busy before, full of beautiful comments, thoughtful shares, and friend requests. A wave of tremendous support rushed over me. The author and me was satisfied by receiving many compliments on the book writing style, which created a brand new, breathtaking feeling of fulfillment. Besides a sense of pleasure, the book brought some monetary benefits. The ebook raised a couple $100 in sales and a few hundred in followers. In December of 2017, I decided to release the paper book version, so it could be available not only as an electronic copy, but as a tangible one as well, an actual paper book which I can touch and feel and eventually sign. Around Christmas time, when the air was saturated with magical spells of the upcoming holiday, I organized a book signing event. My first ever book signing. It sounded like a dream come true. It was such an extraordinary and wonderful event. It brought support of my close friends, along with a group of great new people into my life. I was blown away as much as I was very proud and pleased with the outcome of the event. I could definitely call it a success. A few weeks passed before the excitement around my story and book among my friends and acquaintances started dwindling down. The wave of sales after the publication that I initially observed had noticeably subsided. The moment of realization that my dream path was not moving in the intended direction came very soon. I naively believed that once I published my book and put it on the market, there would always be someone who wished to read and buy it. I was definitely wrong. Beautiful castles built from daydreams and empty fantasies were inexorably collapsing right before my eyes. I had to admit that miracles certainly took place in my life, but it definitely was not the case this time. My book seemed like one tiny sailboat lost in the raging waves of the great ocean of book publishing. To witness my book dying again made me nothing but devastated. I could not let it turn to ashes. It desperately needed help, perhaps a great kick in the form of advertisement on some type of promotion, or simply a genie in a bottle. In those days, my financial situation looked so pathetic that I could not afford spending any money for a costly book advertisement. I planned to spend on advertising what I would make from selling as a result of organic sale. This idea had exhausted itself as soon as I realized that there were no sales. The circle was closed. Even if the book was not selling, my story was still making hot commotion in my social media and served as a topic for passionate discussions. The audience on my Facebook page still deliberated the events that I went through and the nature of my story. Interestingly enough, the space in my virtual reality on social media was also filled with mistakenly made statements regarding the great success of my book. People believed that my book was already a bestseller due to the uniqueness and originality of the story, as if it was magically selling by itself. Unfortunately for me, it did not coincide with the real-life situation. To be honest with you, I was enjoying my newly acquired image of a famous and successful author. I did not have a wish to dissuade my acquaintances. I'd rather prefer to turn their assumptions into accomplished facts. I wanted my book to be successful as they all assumed. Even though I was still receiving a great number of messages with words of support and encouragement, the book sales plunged to a pitiful minimum. From December 2017 to February of 2018, only 5 ebooks and 3 paperbacks were sold from online distributors. This pathetic number was far away from the figure I imagined in my dream. Every morning spent looking at the numbers going down in sales on Amazon, the understanding of how dejected my situation was ironically grew. I figured that my journey as a successful writer was not at all being nearly accomplished, but it was the opposite. It hadn't even started yet. To write a great story did not mean an immediate success. To find readers and constantly see that number increase, that's how I imagined a triumph. To me, my book seemed like a slowly dying, beautiful flower in a pot, one that required urgent and special care. Without it, very soon, it would perish. I desperately needed to find a way to promote Girl Taken. There was no way back. I did not see it in my fantasies. All that I pictured, an old poster with an American flag from the wall in the restaurant where I used to work as a waitress, and written were the words, "The American dream is not about having stuff, it's about having opportunity." All that I had, a one-way ticket journey in front of me. All that I was, an immigrant from a small town in southern Russia, who moved to a different country in her mid-20s with no money, no language, no connections, and no friends, but with a colossal desire to integrate into society, to attempt to reach her goals and start a life from scratch. All that I needed, perseverance and persistence. The timing could not be more perfect to start realizing that sweet American dream. The United States is a legendary country. People either love it or hate it, but no one is indifferent. I belong to those who love America endlessly and sincerely. I think it's the best place in the world to live, to implement ideas, to realize dreams, to raise children. America gives a chance to everyone who wants to take it. If you would like to be someone, just be. And I tried to be, regardless of all my fears and doubts, zero budgets and language barriers, dilettantism and lack of connections. I weighed my possibilities. On one side of the scale, there was everything from the above, but on the other plate of the same scale, there was a great desire to start that path and succeed on it. My journey to success began by organizing my weekly schedule. Monday was proclaimed by myself as a day from now on that would be fully committed to my work towards book promotion. Fortunately, my main job schedule was pretty flexible, and I decided to dedicate the first day of the week to my new job. Since Monday is usually considered the hardest day of the week, I wanted to prove it wrong. I decided to turn it into the most exciting and triumphant one. Since then, Monday for me is the most desirable day of the week, as I'm always impatiently waiting for it to come so I can work on my book success. My American dream indeed started on Monday. Part 9. The Four Whales. In my student years, as part of a school program, we studied ancient myths about the origins of the universe. One of the legends expressed that our ancestors believed our planet was flat and motionless, and therefore it needed some kind of support. They imagined that the Earth rested on the backs of three colossal whales. Even though such an archaic perception seems very naive, in some cultures, three whales together still appear as a symbol of unshakable and indestructible support. In my own imagination, this concept defined my own setting better than anything else. My little Monday world that I dedicated to book promotion also rested on three powerful whales. The only exception, my mighty whales were digital. The internet, of course, and a couple of other amazing digital tools. I don't want to bother you with technicality. Ideally, I was hoping to find that one and only magical website with all the answers and advice from a successful self-published writer, so I could begin implementing their advice right away and momentarily become prosperous. Sadly, I soon realized that there were no secret ways or dreamlike all-in-one online sources filled with the data I so desperately needed. Disappointed, I started creating my own system that would help me navigate through tons of material in cyberspace and separate wheat from chaff. Instead of promoting the book itself, I decided to try making my story viral first, which could eventually arouse the interest into the book. Each Monday, sipping my first cup of coffee, I immersed myself in the digital depth of the sprawling web of the internet, searching for articles related to the topic of my own book in magazines, radio, and TV show archives. I was looking for names of journalists who were covering the niche of true human stories, human rights violations, and human trafficking cases. I believed that they could potentially help me spread the word about my story and book without demanding a payment for it. What could be better for a book sale if not the mentioning of its title in national tabloids? A truly noteworthy story has a bigger chance to grow into bestseller later. The only thing needed in order to make it a reality was the right, powerful receiver who had the ability to deliver the story upon the world. I had been optimistically shoveling through the info online, searching for names that would meet my needs: journalists, reporters, magazine editors. Discovering names was a true challenge. Like a greedy old-time gold miner, I washed down the unwanted waste to reveal the long-awaited treasure deposit. Spending at least 9 hours every Monday, I happened to uncover useful data, sometimes by sheer luck. As soon as I found new contact information, I composed a personal letter and emailed the new contact immediately. The more I searched for contacts, the longer my list grew. My experience with reaching out to journalists, reporters, and radio show producers went very successfully. I emailed without hesitation, many times. My consistency won. So did my system. As days began stretching into weeks and weeks transformed into months, I discovered a new trait of my own character. I found out that I could be very persistent if I really desired to achieve my goal. The 3 digital whales that I introduced to you earlier, the symbol of indestructible unity, welcomed a 4th mighty whale to the trio. I would like to name it Perseverance. As it turned out, perseverance was the most important component in the whole structure. It served as the glue keeping my figurative whales together. I came to the conclusion that these 3 whales, not so metaphorical powerful tools, would lose all meaning and become totally useless without perseverance. All composed together, my amazing quartet was working in unison. It was the vehicle, the funicular that was pulling me up to the top of the vertically inclined slope. Perseverance is a very important personal ability that helps achieve goals. And it is an extremely strong characteristic that makes up the foundation for overcoming obstacles. Perseverance indicates a lengthy but steady effort, a movement towards the goal, and defines a habit of always realizing one's made decisions. Part 10. I am who I am. In my journey, perseverance determined my own situation. I was deeply motivated because I clearly understood that no one would do it for me. In the whole chain, I was the only link that held all the structures and connections between my book and the world. I was the single most important link. I was the one who was making the choice to accomplish the job or blow it and let the book sink into oblivion. How fine is the line between seemingly unrealistic dreams, which often storm through a person's mind but are given up as unfeasible, and the written version of them, broken into steps and visualized as a plan of action, although it may seem unachievable at first glance. A mass of chaotic dreams that are fragmented into tiny stages are easy to control and easy to attain. Their step-by-step slow fulfillment serves as the impetus for moving forward, even though sometimes it feels like climbing a sheer cliff face. Dreams that aren't supported by a plan of realization are not achievable at all. Every Monday, I stuck to the plan that I penciled for myself. I felt like an artist working on a blank canvas of my own life. First, I created a sketch to visualize my entire goal. Then, meticulously and patiently, I filled it with small brush strokes. Next, I added rich colors, hoping to see the accomplished masterpiece one day. My steps were similar. from week to week. I was searching for new contacts, then emailing people on my list. In some instances, I received 0 responses. I was unsatisfied. My human nature was thirsty for a single stimulus, for something that would show me a sign that all I was doing was not in vain. How often people, if unable to implement ideas in a short period of time or spend too much time on their realization, give up and doubt the rightness of their dream. If we can't satisfy our inner hunger reciprocally, after a while we despair. We stop believing and decide to discontinue the chase after our dreams. Consistency and patience were main measures for success in my own journey. They were my best friends. When I received my first positive response, it was like a salvation for a drowning man. So promising. With each encouraging answer from a journalist or magazine editor, with every next publication or article about my book, my inspiration grew stronger. The foundation I was determinedly building turned into a solid base. My chosen path seemed worth following. Through my own actions, I gained strength and motivation to go forward. Was it a fanaticism, or have I just started believing in myself? During my first ever radio show interview, where I was invited as an author, the show hostess dropped a very simple but quite important phrase to me. She said, "Thank yourself for being that persistent." The chances of the email being opened was very low due to the enormous volume of correspondence we received daily. What did it say? It simply portrayed the essence of my system and substantiated its usefulness. I don't know why that phrase stunned me to my very core. The host didn't tell me anything I did not already know, but her words would stick with me and became my motto every Monday since then. It was like a sign from above, like a blessing to show me that the road I chose was the right one, and that perseverance was key. I've always enjoyed writing. Being a writer had been my pipe dream, probably ever since the very first time I had a crush and felt the urge to share my feelings on paper. As I was getting older, I secretly fantasized of becoming a writer, so that I would be able to live my life, to experience things, and then to describe events so interestingly that the whole world would like to read about it. But I never had the courage for it, no time, no opportunity, until 6 years ago. Or have I just thought so? I wish I could fly back in time and convince my young self to think otherwise. It is never the wrong time to dream and to realize those dreams. If you have something to share with others, a story, a book, a business idea, do it. Don't be afraid. You will thank yourself later. Some may say that achieving your dream of successfully promoting a book is easier when there is a unique story behind it, like in my case. Yes, I happen to have an unusual story, but I could have decided that it would never see the light of the day, or I would have never had the audacity to write it, or I could have just self-published a book and sat still, waiting and doing nothing but witnessing its road to extinction. I could have done all those things, and my life would have skipped an extremely wonderful and moving chapter. I'm glad I did not stop. I'm happy to see my progress. I'm thrilled to observe myself moving further. Others may question my success and not see any value in it. I'm absolutely fine with that. It's my unique story, my personal triumph and my perception of success. My own victory over my own self. Only I know how hard that path was for me. Some people think that in order to get publicity for an unusual story, all it takes is a single email. If you happen to be so lucky and have a powerful network, that assumption can definitely apply. I had started my journey from scratch and moved up in small but constant steps. As the old Russian proverb says, you cannot cut down a big tree in one swoop. It took me a few months of sending continuous emails to a TV show in the United Kingdom, after which I was invited as a guest, 1.5 years to receive a response from one of the biggest shows on national TV in the USA. Hundreds of emails were sent to get journalists interested in featuring my book on the news or to get the story on podcasts or the radio. Each publicity event led to mentions in the media, which then brought explosions in book sales. The downloads of the ebook went from 0 to 5,000 a week at one point. Girl Taken was on top of the charts on Amazon in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. The very first media publication mentioning Girl Taken occurred in the British online magazine, Female First. I became totally ecstatic. I persistently kept sending cold emails every Monday. The results were incredible. 6 pages in the exquisite and the most popular paperback UK crime magazine, Real Crime Magazine. A segment on the news WCPO Channel 9 Cincinnati, interviews on WVXU Radio, Audiculture, iHeartRadio, Radio America, one of the biggest radio stations on earth, BBC, interviewed me twice. Other publications such as Cincinnati Enquirer and Mirror UK covered my story and featured my book. The highlight of last year was an invitation to participate on a TV talk show in England. I was so thrilled to be flying to London to speak about my story. The more letters I sent, the more my story was told. The massive wave of healing energy coming from my readers was astonishing. So incredibly strong, I could feel it physically. Long-forgotten episodes suddenly barged unexpectedly into my present like a persistent echo from the past and flipped my life back to my feet. My life has changed forever. Many readers reached out to me with words of gratitude. My story made them appreciate their own life and loved ones more than ever. It's an absolutely amazing feeling, knowing that someone else had benefited from the terrible memories I shared in my book. I think this is what writing is about, touching and moving people's souls. The culmination of my hard work was receiving a literary award, which Girl Taken won in the memoir category at the 2019 Global Awards. Accolades from readers and also from a group of independent literary critics, it all felt like the stars were finally aligning in my favor. The heartfelt feedback and incredible support that my readers bathed me in was reinforced by the recognition of judges, who praised me with the most significant award of my entire life. Such an honor fulfills me with courage and inspiration to keep creating. Receiving the literary award was the moment that prompted me to continue my writing career. Only 5 years ago, there were times when I was broken, completely crushed under the weight of endless difficulties. Down and miserable, I could not even imagine that only a few years later I would be happy and a 6-time published author. On top, I now have my own consulting and publishing company. It's been an incredible journey so far that I don't want to end. I am eternally grateful for the time you have invested in reading my words. It would be my utmost pleasure and great honor if you would consider reading my first book, Girl Taken, a true story of abduction, captivity, and survival. It was never just a piece of literary work for me. It was something much more meaningful and bigger than that. Not just because the events that I described were life-changing, but mostly because they were life-learning. They made me the person I am today. Truly, what did not kill me made me.